So who are we? The Antle, we are a 100% focused partner on the employee service management or employee workflows on the ServiceNow platform. That's all we do. We happen to be an elite partner we've been in business for about 6 years, and through the success of our projects, we were able to achieve elite partnership. But before I kind of get into the integration aspects, I did want to point out that half a dozen of us that work at the Antle, we also worked at former Workday partners, actually implementing the product, and combined 44 years of actual implementation experience with Workday. So our intention is to bring that experience over to the service delivery side of the fence on the ServiceNow platform. I happen to have 6 years as implementing core HR, payroll, compensation, and then the experience across the board there is pretty much the entire product. As far as our customers at the Antle, who are Workday customers as well as ServiceNow customers, we've got about 25 of them. So we've seen this quite a few times. We happen to have one of our customers here from Freddie Mac. Let's see, Freddie Mac's right here. So we've been around the block a few times when it comes to implementing and integrating Workday and ServiceNow. So why do we view this as a powerful duo? And one of the things that I really focused on, or that really became apparent to me early on at the Antle, was that ServiceNow can be viewed as the system of engagement, which you have over there on the left, which means have your employees log in, provide them with relevant information based on information that you know about them, have them complete tasks, view videos, download the upcoming event for the barbecue that's coming up, all the while using Workday as your system of record. Okay, so there's a difference there, the system of record versus the system of engagement or system of action. You trust Workday as your source of truth for your data. You should. Ideally, you should. Because if you're using payroll, you're doing gross to net in Workday, ServiceNow is the consumer of that information. And as an HCM implementer going way back, I will always advocate for the system of truth first. Like, if the data belongs in Workday, keep it in Workday. If you need, there may be an opportunity to leverage, some what we would consider personally identifiable information in ServiceNow, but you're not replicating the data model. And I've had customers that have wanted to do that, call that timeout, like, wait a minute. If we don't need it for reporting, if we don't need it for, let's say, employee-centered content, if we don't need it for case management, let's leave it in Workday. So that's our goal, is to figure out those connection points and make sure that we're providing the engaging experience on the front end using ServiceNow while leveraging the data model of Workday as your source of truth. And down here at the bottom, you kind of see the main ways that we integrate between the two systems. Of course, user data, so authenticating the user into ServiceNow, making sure that they can log in. Their HR profile data, so things like their employment start date, where they're located, maybe their employment end date, who their manager is, but not things like compensation or tax information. That's typically not needed. Also, employee documents. Melissa, I think we were talking about employee document management earlier. The ability to use ServiceNow as kind of a virtual personnel file with all of the information that's related to all the requests that come in using case management. To-dos, those are tasks, right? As a Workday customer, you're familiar with to-dos. There are things that you want your employees to complete. Being able to surface those in ServiceNow is also a more engaging layer, but also deep links. So take the user from ServiceNow over to Workday for what Workday does well. Like, can you collect direct deposit information in ServiceNow? Absolutely. Do you necessarily want to store it there? Probably not. So if you could use ServiceNow and deep link, send the user directly to that, to initiate that business process in Workday, all within the same ServiceNow pane of glass, you've done a good job. And then, of course, transactional data. Somebody gets hired, somebody gets terminated, they have a baby, they get a job change. How do we keep that information in sync? And then also, possibly initiating the business process in ServiceNow and kicking it over to Workday, because you've already gone to great lengths to design those business processes in Workday. So it all kind of meshes together, thankfully. Now, there's a lot on this slide, okay, but I want you to follow me. This is, again, having 25 customers that have implemented Workday, having deep ServiceNow platform experience, as well as ServiceNow's onboarding capabilities. We found kind of the dividing line, if you will. We feel very strongly about the left-hand side of this slide, where we have HR experiences, facilities experiences, IT experiences, and leadership experiences, all within the enterprise side of the business, okay? So what does that mean? That means you can use other aspects of the ServiceNow platform as part of the onboarding experience without leaving ServiceNow. So from an HR perspective, you can make sure that your new hire is assigned a task to attend new hire orientation. They can sign their legal documents. Anything related to intellectual property, declaring international property. Also, providing touch points along the way using surveys, listening posts. Hey, how are we doing? Have you checked in with your new hire already? We also have facilities experiences. Okay, let's provision their office. A lot of people are returning to office. Make sure that they have a badge, a parking pass. So use the facility aspect of ServiceNow to provide, again, a seamless experience within the ServiceNow platform. IT experiences. Of all the onboarding projects that I've personally worked on, the number one thing that my customers want to solve for is, I want to make sure somebody gets a laptop before they start. I don't want them waiting around for 2 weeks so we can go through IT provisioning. So that's where the IT experiences come in. So systems and account provisioning as well as equipment. And then finally, leader experiences. I can't tell you how many times the onboarding experience involves just a welcome video from the CEO. If you can imagine presenting the new hire when they log into the ServiceNow portal, ServiceNow Employee Center, and the first thing they see is a welcome video, a personalized welcome video from the CEO. You can also include the hiring manager, and you probably would with the onboarding experience. Make sure you provide a prescriptive checklist of information for the hiring manager so that they can fully onboard their new hire. And other things related around communicating items about your culture, learning and development, maybe assigning a new hire buddy, all within ServiceNow. In my experience, the first true enterprise onboarding application because of all the items that are on the platform today. Now, from a Workday perspective, it's transactional, right? I mentioned direct deposit, filling out your W-4 for U.S. taxes, E-Verify for I-9, sign up for benefits, do the background check, those types of things. But if you look in the middle here, we've come to realize that there are 3 basic integration options. Number one is ServiceNow can orchestrate Workday via deep links. So assign the task in ServiceNow, deep link over to Workday so they can fill out their direct deposit or enroll in their benefit elections. That's option 1. Option 2, ServiceNow task with deep links to Workday with automated status updates from Workday. Okay, so you get the response back from Workday that the task was completed. So the new hire is not necessarily marking the task complete in ServiceNow. They're completing it in Workday, and Workday is sending the message back to ServiceNow that that task has been completed. And then finally, the third option, which is probably the costliest from a time perspective, is let's rebuild everything that Workday does in ServiceNow. Well, that's not really an integration. That's just lifting and shifting. And then ServiceNow, or Workday, is just the consumer of the data that comes out of ServiceNow. So 3 basic options there. Now, from an onboarding perspective, I know this is a flow diagram, so excuse me, I'm not trying to get technical here, but we want to point out some of the the connection points and the flow of information that we see. And typically, it starts with the applicant tracking system. If you use iSIMS, if you use Avature right here, Silk Road. So the candidate goes through the hiring process, accepts the offer. That sends a transaction over to Workday, a trigger over to Workday to run the hire business process. Okay, we're going to hire somebody before we can actually onboard them. And then from there, their user profile has to be created and synced up into ServiceNow. So that's 2A, right? And then once the new hire process is complete, option 3 here, or step number 3, is where the HR profile actually gets created in ServiceNow. Okay, so now we recognize this new hire as an employee in ServiceNow, which then we can kick off the onboarding process. And then option 4 is, or the step 4 could be that those deep links that I talked about that send the user back over to Workday to finish off, to enroll in direct deposit and your W-4. Okay, so just a high-level data flow for new hire onboarding. Now, this slide looks similar to 2 slides back, okay? But the difference here is instead of onboarding, we're talking about the overall service activity or the services that HR provides from a case management perspective. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you see some common HR services. So I have a question about 401k enrollment. I need to re-verify my I-9 information. I have a payroll discrepancy. Okay, so in ServiceNow, you're collecting that information. You're intaking those requests from your employees and fulfilling those cases. Now, you may still have, you're still going to have your Workday transactions that allow, for self-service for your employees, as well as the hiring managers. But those business processes don't go away, right? It's just how you use ServiceNow to engage with Workday is where that integration really comes to life. The integration options are the same, right? Do you use ServiceNow to orchestrate those Workday tasks? Or do you use ServiceNow tasks with deep links to Workday and then send those status updates back? Or do you rebuild those forms? Okay, so those options are still the same. But it's deciding where you want that activity to occur is where the benefit of the integration comes in. Like I said early on, I will be the advocate for whatever Workday does well, keep doing it that way. Okay? Whatever data needs to live in Workday, keep it there. But let's collect the information, or let's use ServiceNow in a way so that those types of requests that come in, those services that HR provides, can be categorized and accounted for and reported on, and go back to leadership and say, hey, we had 800 payroll discrepancies this pay period. Okay, that's a problem. Well, let's figure out what's going on in Workday, and maybe it's maybe the gross to net calculation isn't working correctly. Or, using ServiceNow for things like rewards and recognition, okay? I log in, I want to recognize my peer for a job well done. Well, the information that we know about that employee obviously is coming from Workday, but the request itself is completed in ServiceNow, okay? So just an example, just a few examples of how, what happens in Workday can stay in Workday. It can be supplemented with, on the service side, using ServiceNow HRSD. So as far as being a partner, again, we're an elite partner to ServiceNow. We have 4 kind of offerings, 4 services that we offer, and of course, initial implementations are probably, the number one thing that we do. You've bought ServiceNow, you want to implement case management, knowledge management, the employee center, agent workspace, all of that. So that's kind of the bread and butter of what we do. We also do a lot of follow-on implementations or advisory work where maybe a customer has been live for a number of months and they're not getting the most out of their investment. Okay, we can come in and use a follow-on implementation and our review and recommend there in the third line to assess where the customer is, point them back to true north, and then, oh, you want to do employee relations? Okay, well, let's get case management right first. You want to do onboarding and offboarding? Okay, let's make sure that the employee center experience is where you want it to be. Okay, and then coming out of the review and recommend there in the third row, we have our executive readout of our recommendations, which ultimately results in a roadmap of, okay, these are the things that we see that we need to fix. This is what you own that you're not leveraging today, and this is how we see you getting there. Now, the last thing here actually could be at the very top. We call it deployment readiness, which is a short engagement before you even kick off your project, so that we can assess your organization on what are your guiding principles and what do you consider to be success? What is your current state? What do you want the future state to be, is from an architecture perspective? What approach do you want to use when you're designing the user experience in ServiceNow? Come up with a risk register and plan on, hey, these are the things that we see relative to your organization that may give us pause going into the deployment. Resource requirements. One of the top things that customers ask for. How much of a time constraint, or how much time are my people going to need to be working on this project? Because you have to keep the lights on as well. And then we come out with a program deployment schedule. Hey, this is how we see this playing out over the next 24, 26 weeks. And then finally the scope, the release schedule, and ultimately the cost. So those are kind of our four ways of, four typical engagements, styles of engagement that we do at the Antle.